Hello ladies and gentlemen, Dave Dobbs here. It's Friday the 28th of July 2023 and we're getting some peculiar sightings as we've come to expect. All our usual suspects are turning up at exactly the time or the times we're expecting them, and there's lots going on. We've got this shot obviously that's just been posted by Brandon Corey Nagley there. That was posted on July the 26th, and we're also getting stories. I just see Leak Project has just bringing in this discussion. I've seen quite a few channels talking about it actually. Evolutionary energy arts, is it arts and energy? Evolutionary energy arts, I think it is. They've just they've also discussed this. I mean, we know this is the normal time we've seen this comet every year for I don't know how long, But before we discuss that and the comet, even though Brandon Corey Nagley also posted that, that was oh sorry, where was it? I've just lost it there, haven't I? There's a bit of zooming in, a bit more of a. That he's just posted that on. Also, that's on the same video, the 26th, and we're going to talk about that. We saw it in the night sky, and then we see it plunge into the day sky as it's done. You remember in 2020 it was Comet Neowise. It was Comet Neowise. What was it? What was it? Well, this shows. If you actually see that and the way they track, and then you see the way if it is on that. That tracks also is doing the same tracking. It's this same object where this was Calvin looking for Hobbes on around about the 15th of October 2020. That is that same object coming in. I don't know if we're going to get such a close flyby of that come October, but that's the same object as well, caught by Alex Luhan, which has led me to this massive understanding. You see that side tracking that I just showed you there? If that was orbiting our sun, it would just go straight down, because as we'd be moving around our sun might be moving, but the fact we see sideways tracking tells us absolutely categorically, even though I didn't realise it at the time when I first made this specific video, probably back in 5 years ago. Understanding about this sideways movement that comes in, it absolutely shows us that these objects are absolutely orbiting something else, and that shot there, when we discovered that shot, when Alex Luhan posted that on the 1st of September 2019, we saw the whole curve of it. Clearly, I was assuming it was coming in, going around our sun, and going to come out somewhere over here, but actually it was coming in as we're seeing it there, and then it goes into the day sky as it's done, and then it finally, it comes round, and we in 2020 came round and passed within this bracket. So it came in and went round there, and Earth came in and around there in 2020. So we saw it just crossing at this point here rather than this point over here. But whether we're going to get such an alignment if it's going to be something similar in October 2023 this year, is difficult to say. But I don't think so. I think we've done the close alignments, but the orbital rotation of this one I'm still a little unclear of. But you remember in 2000, that was that I thought that was 2022, funny enough, but maybe that is July So maybe I was wrong about that one. But what did we have? Certainly July 2000. I think we did have, because we were all looking at it last year, and I can't remember. So I guess that we did have one last year, and then obviously we had it in July 2021. What did we call that one when we saw it? We were saying it had broken up because it hadn't come out the same way, just as I'd assumed with that shot, that it was going to come in here and come out there as they, it actually came in and went round the other side. So what happened with Comet C-2021-03, they said it had disintegrated and that sort of stuff, and yet we had crazy sightings of something in July 2021, and obviously 2020 it was Comet Neowise, and we were all watching it in the night sky, and then it plunged into the day sky, and we had all the shots that came with it, including obviously the Kelvin looking for Hobbs shot. Anyway, I did do that twin tail, just so I thought I'd just cover that very quickly. But actually, primarily, I really want to come back to, because we've, well, let's just, now I've started on that, I might as well, just coming back to that, he's shown in that shot as well, this shot here, and this is our this is the twin tails that are passing us now. These are literally massive, great objects with huge, great tails passing us now. But I do not believe that these are causing the volcanoes and certainly the volcanoes that are going off in Alaska at the moment and Iceland. I'm of mind that this is the object, and so this video really, I want to explore what this is and why we see it now. And because if we're getting the twin tails flying by, so we're understanding that there's well, let's just go back to the models very briefly, and rather than look at this model, which is so complicated, this is 2004 to 2021, where I did a lot of overlays to try and show you all the different sightings, or at least some of them. This is not nearly all of them, but on this model, but showing you some of the sightings. I thought I'd come over to this model instead. Let's just move that down there out the way, and in this model here, let's just go forward, and I broke these down in this model to so here I've got all the twin tails, just the twin tails, and basically all the three twin tails that we can observe and have periodically observed throughout this whole thing. So if we come to 2000 and remember 2011, let's go back to 2011, 2010, 2011. So 2010. Where was it? It was February, wasn't it? It was February the 27th, 2010, and February the 26th, 2010, as in the Icelandic volcano, 2000, February 26th, and the massive 8.8 earthquake in Chile on February the 27th, and so that was either Kerberos or Chiron coming through then, and then we go 1 year and 13 months later, and we get to the day of Fukushima, and we get another flyby, and we've repeatedly seen these twins flying together. We've had multiple shots of them, epic shots. Notice I call them Kerberos and Chiron, and in my last live stream I just discussed how they'd called the two heat waves Kerberos and Chiron, as these two objects I named after, not after, I mean they are kind of like the gods of the underworld, but I wouldn't call them that. But Chiron got his name from, as I discussed in my last video, Richard Harrington, and Kerberos was one of the original, one of the names that was the biggest moon of Pluto, discovered around about the 70s by supposedly Robert Harrington, and then the four other moons were called Kerberos, and there was three others. I can't remember all the names of them now off the top of my head, but But certainly I named those two, Kerberos and Charon, because I call this big object that I'm suggesting all of these planets really orbit Pluto. As in, we've renamed this big blue object every 84 years, as I've discussed throughout this. So we're seeing those two coming back we have to come back to 2023 before they align up, before they're not lining up over here, but they're aligning up over here. And then we come back again and we start the whole process. And then they come out in the kind of June-July period, and we've watched that and we've seen that, and you can imagine as these have gone past and they're leaving this dust cloud, we are peering at the sun through a red dust cloud at the moment, and out in space because of the tail of this going by, and that means there's a lot of debris potentially in the path, because it's cutting across here. There's a lot of debris that we potentially are going to come across right now. But basically they've all gone by now. So we've done those. We've still got potentially a bit of debris that we've got to get through. To be fair, we don't know. But by all our understandings of all the long duration volcanoes that we've seen since 2018, starting with Kilauea on May the 4th, 2018, and then obviously the kind of like the big activity in Iceland and the Canary Islands and La Palma in 2021, the longest duration volcanoes we've ever recorded, or certainly the longest with La Palma ever recorded. We have to seriously consider this, because we've seen nuclear power stations going to meltdown when these things fly by. So we've got to consider that. And then if I now come forward a little bit further, I've just got, see back here, just coming back to here, for example, or even better, back to this one, how I bring all of the objects together. So it's a massively complicated story, and I apologise for that, but it is a massively complicated system to charter, and it's a painstaking process of piecing this all together and working out the patterns, and whether I've got this exactly right. Obviously this model has been massively updated, although I haven't directly updated it, but I've updated it in many discussions of how I can change it here and there. But the overall ballpark is about as close as we're going to get right now. I don't think you'll see anyone else on YouTube offering you such a model. I don't think you'll see anyone in the world offering you such a model. But it's complicated, and I realise that, and we bring them all together. So this is, in this model, I broke them all apart a little bit more, and we're just going to come now to Hydra, which is what I'm talking about here. This object here that appears red here, but sometimes appears blue, depending on whether or not the red twin tails, or the twin tails with this red oxide, or this oxide that when it touches our atmosphere, it becomes it gets oxidized, and iron goes red when it's oxidized, and so we get this kind of like this red tint put over the top of it. So let's just go through these images, because before we do that, we're just also recording right now that we're seeing these volcanoes happening in the northern hemisphere, and I've been predicting this, saying that if the volcanoes go off in the northern hemisphere, you know that we're going to get crazy storms. You know, the sort of storms we normally expect certainly in Europe in October. They're all going to come now. Especially, they're just going to come in Europe and North America now. The biggest storms you can ever believe. The biggest flooding, because all the objects and everything's there to make it happen. The volcanoes are going. That's going to send the dust up. The heat is there. The oceans, the ocean temperatures in South Florida top 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hotter than body temperature. That's like 38 degrees centigrade, roundabout. It's the highest temperature ever recorded, higher than anything ever recorded, and that's because of that's the eruption seen from space for for Iceland, but we come over here and we look at where Mount Shishaldin is. First I saw it, I thought, is that Shiveluch? But it's actually a completely new volcano. But it's apparently it's about the fifth eruption in the last, since ironically Iceland has been going off as well. So we're seeing massive activity, constant activity going off in the northern hemisphere, and we've got our sightings of this object. So let's now just come back to this and just try to because that just brings Hydra, and I brought these two together because you'll notice that these two, you'll see this object coming around here, which I've named Jupiter, which isn't as it's not as I have it here. These are one and the same, these objects, but I put this in because I couldn't believe when I made this video that Jupiter could come in and round our sun, and yet we had evidence that something was there other than the twin tails that was big, and we were seeing it, and I just couldn't understand it. And so but we had all the seismology, we had the sightings, we've had all the data, and I thought we're going to explore this, just this one right now, for a little bit on this this model now, because it's a little bit out, but I'm of a mind that we're getting a shot like that where it's in between us and the sun. Now we would never normally see something that's between us and the sun, say the moon, very close to the earth. And yet when it's on this side and it's coming around this aspect of the sun, and you're not going to see it, not unless there's a total solar eclipse, and then you're only going to see the shadow it casts. It's just going to be a black disk. You're not going to see the moon, as in see the details of the moon. You're never going to see the moon anywhere, and it's coming around this side. When it starts dropping back here and coming round the earth, back around here, we start getting a view of it, you know, in the daylight sky. But and then it comes around here, and we can see it in the night sky, obviously on the back end. But we don't see anything, the moon right there, and yet suddenly we're seeing a big object that appears to be next to the sun and bigger, and it's an impossible sight unless, of course, something is obscuring the lights a little bit. Because, you know, if I was to shine a torch into your face in the darkness, you'd see a bright light and it would be dark around the bright light. And yet when we look up at the sun in the daylight sky, we see the bright sun, but we see blue sky all around us. And that's because the light from the sun is hitting our atmosphere, and it's causing a process. The photons apparently are hitting O2 and splitting O2 into O and O, and each O and O, each oxygen atom, will oxidize anything, and pretty much, and it will oxidize O2 and produce O3, produce ozone, and that process creates this light, creates this plasma in the sky. And that is so bright that if you were to look at our sun without a visor, if you looked at the earth without a visor, it would appear like the sun from outer space. You'd have to have enormous eye protection because it would be burningly bright. And so we are looking through this very bright sheen atmosphere that blocks out anything occurring. But if the sun rays are being blocked, then the sheen is temporarily reduced. The bright sheen of the plasma of the process of the photons hitting our atmosphere, that sheen is reduced, and we are getting a view, a red tinted view, but a view nonetheless of this object. And it's what I've told you. We've discussed this. We've let's just look at. That was, you remember, on the 24th of November 2022, you saw it coming in. That was World of Signs, and you can see the red reflection of this object. And I'm of a mind that because we had the twin tails coming in, we're having the same situation occurring. There's no way that a whole dwarf planet has come in between us and the sun there. This has in this situation, what's happened there is 2020. When did I say that was? That was 2022. In September, did I say October? No, November, sorry. In November, so 2011, have I got that right? Maybe I haven't got that quite right, the timings of that quite right. But you can see, you know, a year before, this object would have been 1 calendar month behind, and the year before it'd be 1 calendar month behind that. You know, so every year it rotates, almost the same as Earth, going round this big object and then coming back round, almost in the same speed as Earth. But it's going 1 calendar month further forward every year, and it seems to be showing that. So that's a massive shot of it. It's panning around with us. You know, sometimes we see it as blue, sometimes we see it as red, depending on what's obscuring it at the point of view. That was a Mr. MBB 333 video shot caught on on the US Masters golf tournament very recently. You know, I only posted that probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we've seen this object coming in, it's come round the sun, and now it's going out the other side. Now this is it coming out the other side, I'm assuming. Amazing shot. It was just absolutely incredible shot. Around about the 24th of November last year. That was on the 11th of July, 2023. Again, sometimes we're seeing it from the red haze perspective. The sun's got to be quite low in the sky. There's got to be other things obscuring it for us to get the view, and there we get the view. That was on the 10th of June. And that was on the 7th of April. Notice that because it's coming round the sun, and it's going to come out the other side, and we're coming around the sun. I'm going to meet it on the far side as we're doing. You can imagine that the light of the sun is still hitting on it, so to speak. It's being completely and utterly saturated in light, so we're getting a window on it there. So if we come back to this shot here, October the 20th, 2020. So that's like the November shot, 2022, where it's actually closer to us there, because in 2022 it's almost the same size as this. So it's closer to us at that point of observation. But if for every year we move on. We've moved on from 2020. It's moving closer and closer to the sun from our perspective at that point, and it's just getting smaller and smaller. And so we'd expect to see that, and that's October. When was the last one? October the 20th, October the 30th. See how it's it's slightly smaller in the view. And then we come to December the 3rd. These are all the shots coming in, and these are the shots going out. This is July the 9th, 2020, a Nick Thomas shot again. And here you can literally see as it's cutting through, and you can sort of see the direction it's cutting through there. So it's coming through this way and coming down. And notice if it's crossing the sun at that point, that means it's crossing the ecliptic plane at that point. But we're still getting the earthquakes and the volcanoes in the northern hemisphere. This, as far as I can see, has still got to cross the ecliptic plane. And when you're seeing the type of forest fires and everything else like that we've got going, all the forest fires in Europe at the moment, all the forest fires in Canada, these aren't like the forest fires happening in Australia years back where this thing was affecting the southern hemisphere. This is now affecting the northern hemisphere. This is going to be massive forest fires. And it's going to be exciting the magma under the earth massively, as we're seeing with the Icelandic volcano, as we're seeing with the kind of like the volcanoes in the volcano in Alaska, as we're seeing with the massive rise in water temperature in the Pacific right now, as we're seeing with the ground temperature, I mean, in much of northern Europe, in much of southern Europe and the northern hemisphere at the moment, the type of forest fires that are going, we're not accounting for this in any of our. We're all just saying this is human caused, and you need to have a. You know, it's all human caused problems. We're not recognizing this object at all in any of our mass. But that's the point it crossed the ecliptic plane. This thing, as far as I can see, is heading down towards an object that sits below now the ecliptic plane of our system. As in, this object now, it's our sun is coming round and cutting up through the ecliptic plane of the big system, this big blue object that we're currently calling Pluto, and our sun are all orbiting something down here. I won't go to the macro view there, but the just now. But our sun is cutting up, and now it is just above the ecliptic plane of the big system we really orbit. Not the ecliptic plane of our sun, but the ecliptic plane of this whole system is rising above the big system that our sun really orbits. It's just coming up through now, and it's above, which means that this object has to now come up to Pluto again. It's got to spiral around. It's going to be drawn back up, so it's got to cross, and it's very close. And if I'm correct about this, it's got to go down now to the Pluto system. We're just above it, which means it's got to come round and work its way back down to go back down round here, and then come back up again and do this pretty much the same thing. But there's got to be a crossing point. There's got to cross the ecliptic at some point. We've seen it. We've seen it occur here. We saw it occur in 2000. We saw it occur here in July, and we can see just by this shot that this thing is moving quite fast through the ecliptic. If this thing was on its trajectory out, its final trajectory out, moving away from our sun, we would get very little visual movement here of this object, because it would be on its outward trajectory. The fact that we're seeing this means that it's still in its rotation point. It's still rotating. Once it's coming out, and if we were observing it from this perspective here, it would just be coming towards us and curving around. Its position would be much more fixed, but we're observing it from, say, around about this perspective in 2020. So we're seeing it go fast, much faster. That's why we get that's why we get that that's why we get that movement. That's why we see that movement so clearly. In my opinion, and we know July is the kind of exit point of the one that we're just getting, and we're getting it now. We're seeing it. We're seeing the red dust. We're seeing the epic shots of it. We're seeing all of the evidence that we need that this big one's coming in. We saw it coming in. You remember I don't know if I've got it up, as in the have I got any of my? You remember in my last videos where I was exploring, I predicted these big flybys, that you'd see these two big flybys independently, that all over the Guardian comments they called earthquake clouds now, because people are so used to seeing this system now, that or this object that they call a lenticular cloud that comes with massive earthquakes and is utterly predictable. And I've charted it so many times, and the earthquakes that come with it, as the big one on the 20th of January 2017, when I'd said you're going to see it on around about the 20th, 24th, and there it was, came into massive view, came with a massive 8.0 earthquake in Papua New Guinea. Was the most spectacular thing that I'd ever seen in my life, outside of Jeff P's epic shot on the 14th of October 2016, where you see Jupiter plasma charging a planet, and we'll come to that. But where were we? We got to that shot there, and if we come to that shot there, do you remember that was also the same time? That was Dill Martin's, probably his last video, where he literally shows that he just shows this slow moving object that moves, ironically, at a very similar pace to the passage that Nick Thomas showed on his video back in 2020. Sorry, I'm being a bit disjointed. I'm trying to bring so much information here, and it's always quite complicated. But that's the same object. You know, I caught the objects myself. What I'm of mind is you can barely see them here, but I could see them very clearly, and that's a bit of a, because it's a bit faded. It's been shown so many times, but I thought I'd keep that video up because there's lots of interesting shots on there that I wanted to bring in later. And we might come back to that anyway. But this, going back to October 14, remember that I talked about how I've got the shot in there. Remember this shot in it was October the 14th, 2013, not October the 14th, 2016, where this same object is now behind the sun. Let me just... Seen from Australia. It's coming towards you. The sun is reflecting sunlight. It's coming towards you. It's... let's go back to October 2013. See, at that point, got to go back again. October 3rd. See how we're coming round. I don't know if I've got the best. You know, the timings of these. When I built this model, I'd swung them round so much to breathe, and I can rearrange this because I didn't know the true forward motion of our sun when I made this model. So I was trying to estimate it by the sightings of the comings ins and the goings outs, and so when I finally worked out that it was December the 21st, that was the forward motion of our sun, that when we were right here and our sun is going forward, when we're here, that would be December the 21st. And I didn't know that when I built the model, so I'd had to calculate that without knowing that, and slowly honing in all the information and bringing it all together. Lots and lots of bits of information have just suddenly made sense. It's a bit like a Sudoku, and you start getting enough bits of information, and you start putting them down, and you start getting big cascades of information, big cascades of answers. And so imagine if we were over here, slightly further forward, and over here, and looking at this object coming in. That is that object. And really, I needed to have the sun going slightly more in this direction. But obviously, you know, we have to build these models and piece them together bit by bit to get them exactly right. And the next model I build, you know, which I keep putting off because there's been more and more corrections to this model, and I just realised that it took me 2-3 months to build this model, and I just haven't got the time or the money or the resources to do that anymore now. But this model is sufficient, really. You know, it gives you the ballpark. It would be so lovely at the end of this to bring all of this model together to the type of level that I would be able to do this now with the type of technologies that are available, to bring this to a super fantastic level. But it's enough just to say that would have been back in 2013. This would have been much further back from our point of view in October. We wouldn't see it between us and the sun as we've been seeing since about 2000, and we saw it crossing in 2017, and we literally got the passage of it going past us in 2017, which was the Dill Martin shot. And then from then on in, it's always been, every time we've come to October, November, it's been somewhere between here, getting further and further and further along each time. And now when we get down to July, August, we are coming around here, it's moving one calendar month forward every year, and it has been since 2017 to now. And it's been slowly panning across here, coming right round the other side and coming out here, and we've been getting this view of it as we've been going around here every year since that time. And now we're getting to the point where we're seeing it right over here, and it's coming to its exit point, which we have to assume is either August or September. We truly don't know, because the last people that would have ever seen this would have been, the last people to ever have known this would have been in 262. It would have been the Romans. These were the last ones who would have ever encountered this flyby. Will there be another as close flyby? Could we push it back to 2024 and say the crossing point is going to be in 2024? I don't think it's feasibly possible, because in 2024, this is going to go back to it's going to go back to what we saw with Nick Thomas's shot in 2020, and it's going to be cutting down to go to this, to go back down to this object. So we're not going to. Well, I don't think it's possible that we can see it. Obviously, I truly do not know. This is my best attempt to understand the movements of this thing, but I don't think it's possible. I think it's going to be heading down. It looks like it's going to be the only flyby where it can actually come out at this point, near to where Earth is. Unfortunately, by the mass of what we're seeing, you know, by all and bringing in, you know, you understand that you go back to 2004. You know, I've got, you know, it starts at kind of like, just, you know, where the 24th, no, it's the 26th of December 2004, we get the massive tsunami that occurs in Indonesia, India, Thailand. It was massive. It was a massive seismology occurs there, you know, as it cuts through. And then it's going to go forward one calendar month every year until we get to 2008. The big Sichuan earthquake that occurred on the 12th of May 2008. the real precursor for the for the massive financial crash, as in China, everyone pulled their money out. They knew we were going to be so close to this object, but it was cutting down through the ecliptic. It was not going to come out past Earth. It doesn't reach Earth at that point. It's going to come right round here, but this was its closest proximity, and it cut between Earth and our sun, but didn't actually get close to us. But it would have had a massive gravitational effect. A massive pulse of energy would have occurred, and did occur, and caused a massive earthquake. And our governments would have been terrified. All around the globe, governments would have been terrified of this object. And so everyone pulled their money out to take it to a safe haven. We gave our excuses. No one would have even believed that this object was flying by. So this was the 2008. I found this by mathematics and building these models, all of these, and then we have to go to 2016 because this is going to be affecting this. This is all around here at the closest rotations until we come to 2016 again, where we had the big earthquake in Fukushima again, the big earthquake in Christchurch, but it's still coming in under the ecliptic plane. It's still affecting us in the southern aspect. Now, like I say, this came from under in 2024. And it's being pulled up towards our sun, but it's going to be looping around, going back down, because it's getting drawn up by our sun. It should go up, but it's got to actually, as it comes around here, it starts dropping back down to go back down to the Pluto system. So I'm just trying to remember which object we're talking about. Oh, we're just talking about the 2016 earthquake in Papua New Guinea, and obviously Fukushima again, and then we're watching now. When we come back to 2018, I'm of mind that it was the volcano started long duration, May the 4th, 2018. I'm of mind it's more likely it's this object. I still don't know, but that was causing it, and it was coming out, and it was affecting us in the January, February, March period. As this is going around, it doesn't fly out there. It actually flies out in September. But like I say, the angle of the dangles of all of these is slightly off. As I've, like I say, this was a big practice run to try and bring the 1800 years of movement into one model, and attempt to start bringing together. Because, like I say, the next time I do this, depending on what happens, we need the exit of this big one, and then we've got it all. Ready to, and then I think enough people will be interested in actually in having me build a bigger model, because we're not going to get another chance for it's going to be 1800 years before we get another chance to build a model like this, because we either go back to sleep now and we go back into a static sun model where all our planets move around our static sun, which cannot have motion given our standard model, because all our big players beyond Mars are all given a different perihelion point, all suggest the sun is moving in a different direction, as I've explored in so many videos. And so we can't have this, if we're going to perpetuate the standard model, humanity's got to go back into a state of sleep, and become closed-minded again for another 1800 years, which I truly hope doesn't happen. And the only way we can come out of that is knowing our place in the grand scheme of things and coming out of the grand deception of things. You know, if we want to be cosmic beings that are connected to the cosmos, we have to know our place in the cosmos. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's the ultimate primary shamanic process of connecting to the divine, is knowing your place in the scheme of things. And we're throwing stories at this whole thing right now. We're watching the most incredible earth changes happening as we are getting close to this exit point here of this object. So that was that object, which gives us a real kind of understanding of going back in time to 2013. And well, that's the that's it really. It's not really I can't really give you any specific, true, absolutely real answers to what's going to happen, because none of us really know what's going to happen now. But I'm of a mind that that object has got to do its exit strategy. All that is just the red dwarf, and but something's making these volcanoes go off at the moment. Something's up there, and we could assume it's, as Brandon shows here, we could assume it's this big object we can see glowing. We're seeing it coming in. We're seeing the we're seeing the Twin Towers as we're expecting to see, flying by in all their glory. You know that, and the fact that we're seeing. I mean, anyway, that's it, folks. It's you know, I'm you know, I've done this so long now. I'm more over it than anyone else, and I know that you guys have been with me for a long time watching this, and what to make of any of it, what to make of all of it, what to make of some of it. You know, where most of us are going to have our channels shut down if we, or be massively restricted and demonetized and deviewed, and decommented and desubscribed and massively restricted if we talk about this. So if we want to make money on YouTube, I guess most of us have to follow the standard model NASA narrative and go with that and pretend that this thing's not up there and just go with this is all human caused and not see any of this. And it upsets me enormously, it really does, because I feel so powerless at the moment, I really do, and everything's really tight at the moment. I have set outside my truck, so I'm just kind of like anyway, it's getting there. I'm a few days away from finally finishing it. I'll show you some pictures of it when it's done, and you never know, there might be someone in the UK who's really interested in it. Who knows? Anyway, it's going to be up for sale soon, and hopefully get me out of Dodge, because it's financially it's really, really tight. And that's not asking for money, guys. I'm it's you know, I've been lucky a few times on YouTube, but by main it's a fruitless task asking for money, and I know that's it you know, what's it for, you know, and it's you know, for me it's a bit of a brick wall at the moment, watching all of this going on, realizing that, you know, I'm just going to sit back here and, you know, the book I wrote saying you know, a man tortured with this notion that he has to he has to watch his in some really horrible vision, has to watch his world, watch Europe being, or watch Britain being used as the Trojan horse to break up the European alliance and feed Europe into a war against Russia, to get Europe to fight for the economic hegemony that another party wants, that is not Europe, but Europe is being used as the sacrificial anode in this. And that's what I wrote in my book, Laughing Gas, and I'm seeing all of that, just, you know, just watching all the grain storage places in the Ukraine now being destroyed by Russia because of apparently a British drone submarine that has been used to blow up the bridge. I think it links Crimea with Odessa or something like that. I'm not too sure exactly, but I know this big bridge has been seriously damaged by a British drone submarine, and now Russia have pulled out of this massive wheat deal, and the wheat is mostly supplying, well, it supplies much of the world's food, and it's going to be much of it goes to Africa for sure, and so that food is going to be cut off to Africa, and so the food prices are going to be going up in Africa, and there's going to be, you know, this is the beginning of this, and, you know, when these flybys are all gone and there's nothing left, then the big guns can come out. Remember in 1939, the big flyby that Carlos Rada predicted on the 20th of January, 1939, where he said thousands of people would die in Chile unless they took absolutely massive effort to be away from massive buildings and that sort of stuff. And, you know, people would have just laughed in his face. And then the earthquake occurred, and you know, and then the war begins. And so on the last flyby, when the last flyby goes, we know what the Western governments will commence to get economic hegemony, and will they be allowed that? Will these flybys allow that? I'm of a mind that we didn't have that in 1939. In 1939, going back to looking at the big macro view of the whole model, to go back to 1939, I'm of a mind that in 1939, when we had the big flyby, I mean, this was all ballpark when I built this. These aren't obviously precise or anything else like that, but but the ballpark alignment is there, obviously. But in 1939, after 1939, after Carlos Rada's big prediction, I know Vesuvius went off in February-March 1944, and obviously, you know, we're talking about Vesuvius going off in if Vesuvius was to go off in our epoch, it would be in the next week or two, if this thing is doing what I'm expecting. it could be that it's going to go later. It could be that it's next year that the closest flyby in July, or in August, September is going to be in. I just don't think it's feasibly possible by all the long duration volcanoes we've seen. But after 1939, we'd had the biggest flybys. Then it was just like, okay, we can go to war and the gods can't do anything. And so the war commenced from that period. Or it was just that the actual big blue object was so close to us then that that's the point of what I call soul migration, where souls have the opportunity of jumping, those that are ready to jump to the fifth dimension, to jump to another realm, to have their soul address at a different place than Earth, instead of having a soul address in Earth astral realms. You know, that there's souls that are of a high enough vibration are given the opportunity to migrate their souls to a higher, not an Earth astral realm, which is each soul's individual Earth astral realm, as it is, as I'm understanding on Earth, that each soul has their own multiverse. It's like a multiverse of astral realms that each soul has. And this, when we come close to this object, this big blue object, when it comes really close, we have the opportunity at those points, if our vibration is high enough, to migrate our soul to the fifth dimension. And we have been used for a long time. Humanity has been hijacked for a long time to build realms for other beings that they inhabit, so they don't have to enter into the third dimension, as in this physical dimension, and enter into the karmic realms where they can get very stuck. So they have piggybacked off the back of humanity's experiences and used those to build astral realms, and many souls have got stuck in these Earth astral realms created by the current Earth gods that run the earthbound astral realms. And which ones you'll consider are heaven is a matter of choice. Many consider the earthbound astral realms, where we go when we die, to be heaven. Others would consider the fifth dimension to be heaven. Depends where you're at. Depends where you're at in your vibration and your soul story. You know what? But many are being given the opportunity now to migrate to the fifth dimension. So this is going to be a fantastic opportunity, because we're so close to it now. We're so close to this, the home of the fifth dimension, where it's not every soul has their own individual realm. It is the merging of all of your best. And this is what the fifth dimension is. It's a mutual realm. It's a peaceful realm. To get into that realm, you have to make a peaceful concession. And the way you make this peaceful concession is by not going into war. And so this big story that's being thrown to you through the current narrative is a narrative to invite you into war and low vibrational existence, to block that opening to allow your soul to ascend. Not that you can stop your soul ascending, it's just that if your soul ascends without you, that's you can see that as an ascension process. Like, after this, there's going to be a dramatic change. The Kolbrin Bible, as I often talks about how after the big flyby of whatever era that the Kolbrin Bible describes, that when they came down from the mountain from their hiding places, they had no memory of who they were, and their guides and gods were gone. They had given their bodies over to their egos, and their higher selves had moved off to the fifth, had left them behind. But it's not that their souls had left them behind, it's that they're humans. the humans that they incarnated with had plunged they had chosen to lower their vibration and go into war and hate and all the blame and all the stories, and their humans had chosen to separate from their highest aspects. And that's what's being presented to humanity at the moment, the same opportunity. And this idea of ascension, I've got a funny feeling it's not all it's clapped up to be. Well, it is for the soul that departs, but it's also a tragic loss because it has to leave the human being or go with the human being and go on the same journey as the human being, but that means giving up all it's created over its many, many lifetimes, and going with the human being and staying with that experience and going down and coming back to earth and going back through another cycle. That means losing everything it's created. And I don't think not many souls are going to want to do that. And it's a crazy story. The whole thing is a crazy story. It exhausts me talking about it now. I find it so difficult. So there's lots of areas of this that we can see pretty much what's happened, but there's, when we get to this when we have this final big flyby in July, August, it's been one of the twin towers that caused the crazy storm that happened in July 1588 that destroyed the Spanish Armada. It wouldn't have been the big blue one. We wouldn't overall have been close enough. We would have been so much further away that we might have been getting the twin tails, even though I've got this, the whole distance of this and the whole ballpark, that I'm going to massively upgrade this. The ballpark idea is actually correct, but there's so many changes that need to be brought to this, and it needs a massive step in, obviously, in animation skills. So I'm going to have to get a lot of help if I'm going to take this further. But the essence of it's there. But I don't believe that in 1588 we would have been close enough for for Pluto, or for the big blue object here to actually come by. But the twin towers could have, and apparently did do. Anyway, there we go. I'm actually exhausted, so I can't do that anyway. I can't go on anymore right now. But it's July was certainly the period when the great storm happened. But then it's a bit of a confusing thing, because there's a bit of a confusion there, because obviously the calendar's changed in 1582, and it didn't change for Britain, and we record the Spanish Armada as in July 1588, but we record it in July 1588. But there's a bit of confusion there, because we didn't change our calendar in Britain and America till 1852, maybe, I think. So obviously much of Europe and the Catholic Church readopted the Gregorian calendar over the Julian calendar in 1582, and so there's a confusion, and we lost 1 month and 1 year and 10 days apparently. So we'd say we've got it recorded in 1602. Is it 1606 on the 20th of January again? 20th of January obviously repeatedly pops up. We record the the tsunami, the massive tsunami that occurred in Britain, and that's when the Azores was going bang as well. And that happened on the 20th of January. But actually now we'd say it happened on the 30th of January, 1607, Gregorian calendar, but the 20th of January, 1606, Julian calendar. So we have this kind of like 10-day period. Is it a 10-day period? Was there a much bigger change? Was the whole thing massively rewritten, and the Catholic Church just annihilated any sign of intelligence, anyone who had any knowledge of what really happened in the past before that period of time was killed off, and by the Catholics that threw this whole new story over the top of anything, and anyone who didn't obey the story just got killed, and everyone had to live a lie until everyone just only knew the lie, and Britain stayed out of it, but we entered into our own form of the lie with the Newtonian stories and everything else like that, with our own, and then we were at odds with the Catholic Church, which led to the 1588 attempted invasion, which ended up with the complete destruction of the Spanish Armada before it even got to Britain. Not one troop landed in Britain, apparently. I mean, all of these stories now, everything is up in the air because we've been so massively lied to that we can't trust any story now. The whole thing, everything is up for grabs. We're just saturated with sightings that make no sense through the looking glass of the standard model which has been pushed onto us for 500 years. Makes no sense. Makes no sense in an astronomical model. Makes no sense by all what we're seeing. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. None of it. All of the objects that we've seen beyond Mars by the satellites that we sent out, everything from Galileo to the New Horizons, Juno, and whatever else we sent out beyond Mars, has all sailed straight through the Kuiper Belt without consequence. Sometimes, it took New Horizons a year to get to Jupiter. It took Galileo something like 7 or 8 years. And yet we know that by what we're seeing, that this object is much closer to us now. And so we'd expect it to be a much quicker journey. Not one of the satellites that's ever gone beyond Mars has ever used Mars to do a slingshot around. Not one. They've all gone into Jupiter, to Venus. All of them. They'll go to Venus and do a slingshot around Venus. Why? And we have to kind of we've got to question some of that. We've got to, unless we kind of question that. Was it in that model that I show? Not that one. Maybe it was this one here, where I show that. Do you remember the New Horizons? Oh, that was the. There is a great shot of. There is that. I found the original footage of Jeff Pease. I said we were going to show the plasma shot. That was the original footage of. This was 10:30 at night, and we see what is, I'm assuming, the real object that is somehow screened off from us by technology that we can't believe. And yet this big sun comes into view, and in the night sky, as we'd imagine a sun in the night sky that isn't producing photons. It's a bright light, but it's not producing photons, so the photons aren't reacting with our atmosphere in the same way as our hydrogen sun. Remember, hydrogen is the lightest atom on the periodic table. Our sun is made of the lightest atoms on the periodic table. and we're assuming that it is the center of our big system, and yet it's made of the lightest atoms. And we can understand that as something fuses down and gets heavier to the point comes where it's not fusing hydrogen and hydrogen together to come up with helium. It's fusing much denser atoms together and forming iron, and we're seeing an object that clearly spews out iron, which seems to get attracted around these twin-tailed objects, and they have this iron tail that runs behind them. And suddenly we see this view, and we see part of this. See that there? We've seen this kind of thing before, like it's some kind of device, and ironically, the first thing in even though showing it in that order, the first thing that came into view was this. Sorry, yeah, there it is. See, so that was the original shot, and then this, whatever this massive charge causes, the whole system, whatever's up there, to come into view. Like, all of this is being screened off us. So we get the massive charge of what I have to assume is Jupiter, of Jupiter plasma charging, or this big object that we've been calling Jupiter, that we just don't allow to exist in our mathematics. It's been screened off from us by a story of belief that everything has been laid up. So much effort has gone into this standard model bullshit story to screen off this, that we don't know how to see beyond what's happening. And you know, that still to me is probably the most, you know, amazing. It was, you know, I mean, you know, I'm a Planet Xer. You know, I've been making videos about the system for a very long time now, and I've seen it all. I've seen it all, and certainly Matt Rogers' shot there. I'm just looking at that epic shot of Matt Rogers. But you know, we like I say, that's October the 14th, 2016. And so it's just getting closer and closer to us at that point, until obviously we had the big shot that what was it? I was going to say Dill Martin put up on the in mid-January 2017, before we had the big epic shot of the that put me on the map on the 20th of January 2017, on the day of Trump's inauguration. It was all going on. This is when we were getting closest to the main, this object passing us in 2016, 2017. Now we're getting to the exit point in August, September. We have to assume 2023, possibly 24. But I think we've seen the range. I really do. I think we've seen the range. I think we're at the end point now. We're at the kind of final point, and then we don't, you know, as far as I can see, we don't have another passage till 2032 after this. You know, maybe wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're kind of like this, whatever they're calling C12 or whatever it's called now. What is the current name for it? It's 12P Pons Brooks, that they're suggesting. Whether that's going to be a kind of like, whether that's going to bring about a really close flyby of the kind of like sort of thing we saw on the 15th of October 2020, the Calvin looking for Hobbes shot. We just don't know. But you know, for me, I'm of the mind that we're coming to its most absolute intensity. This is when the ground at which we stand starts getting really hot. This is when the oceans start raising temperatures to stupid degrees. This is when we're at that juncture now. You know, a juncture we haven't seen, I don't believe, since 262. And only time will tell. Only time will tell. But you know, it's a real time where you're going to decide which side of the equation you're on. This is Judgment Day. This is the time when everyone denies that this thing is there. This is, you know, this is the point of denial of the system, and every effort to control the story through a belief story, and in any which way, form we can, to control the narrative in any which way. And maybe I'm guilty of that as well. I mean, for me, I don't believe in this. I charter this. I try to build models that account for all of the sightings of this, and it's taken a massive amount of work to do it. And but this one, we truly don't know. You know, I've got an idea of the orbital mechanics of this, but I've got much more of an idea of the orbital mechanics of this right now, and that is, by all our understanding of solar observations, an absolutely impossible shot. And yet the only way we could see it is if it was obscured, if the rays of the sun were being obscured by something. And there it is, guys. You're looking at just another one of the amazing shots of the Planet X system, which absolutely confounds us and just absolutely defies everything you've been told. And yet it's just one of the thousands and thousands of epic shots that we've seen since 2011 that we have walled off like so much by stories of belief. That is what humanity is about to overcome, the story of belief. As we go through this big bottleneck of singularity, we all come to this juncture of which side of the fence we're really on. Whether we're warring controllers or whether we're in peace. You know, which side of the fence we're on in this. It's just a different stage, just the stage of evolution that you're at individually. This is about your individual story right now. And where you need to go and what experience you need to have. And whether you're going up or down, there's energy out there that wants to assist you one way or another. But all of you right here, you're not choosing a side, you're choosing a soul. And in so doing, you're actually choosing a God. You're all choosing which God is the right God for you. And there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just what is most right for your soul destiny right now, and your humanity, your human destiny right now, and your ego destiny right now. They're all, and your humanity has to pick a side, which means it has to pick a soul. And that is done through the narrative that you connect to now, and what you're opening yourself to, and what you're closing yourself to. Maybe you're just a bit too cool for this story. It's alright. Maybe you are cool. Maybe you are too cool for this. Certainly you won't have got to this stage of the video if you are. You'd have been... You wouldn't have got the first 2 minutes. First 30 seconds. And my videos go over and over, and I'm so sorry I have to keep repeating this, but it's the only way I know of doing this, because it's our only chance of getting humanity through this. It's getting a real window on this and navigating from that perspective, from a higher perspective of what's really happening. And not just disappearing back into the deception and the lie, going with that. good luck through these times. You know, this is, you know, I'm making less and less videos on this now. The gaps are getting bigger between me posting. You know, there's, my inquiry into this is almost complete, really. And it's probably not good for me to do this anymore, really. I'm feeling I'm coming to the end of it, and I'm seeing so many of my compadres in this falling out of it and realizing they can't take it any further. And I guess I'm getting close to that mark myself now. I thought I've been close to that mark for a long time, really. It's quite a challenging thing to do. Honey in the heart, 1,000 thank yous. So much appreciation for following me this far. And for you Skywatchers out there, you know, you've carried this as much as I've carried this. We've all carried this. We've all had to kind of walk a very odd and painful path within this, of seeing something that most people would just utterly deny. Even if they saw it up there, they would still deny it, because that's the nature of this thing. You know, is to deny it. Thank you so much. Ciao.